Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Sort of a dark, low energy morning here. So I'm struggling with low energy. All right, I'm going to say a few things. I would like today to be our last day focusing on Joko. We're, we are in a new month now, but kind of like to kind of start fresh post Labor Day. And so, even though we're not quite at the end of the book at discussing it as a group, Um, I'd like to see if we can kind of wrap up our conversation about the book to whatever extent that's possible. So, in the course of this morning, if you have questions or particularly poignant observations about Joko or the book, please bring those up. We'll talk about them. Um, looking at the book brings up to me again the difficulty of using language to talk about the Dharma. We've talked about this a little, but it just keeps popping up for me again and again. I think Joko is one of the clearest teachers that I've encountered. And yet she keeps wandering into the traps of language. I think it's almost impossible to avoid them. And unfortunately, I think those are sometimes the things we tend to like latch onto um, because they appeal to our intellects. Uh, you know, and we have a tendency to complicate things and to like a certain degree of complication. We are complex creatures. We like the world to mirror our complexity. We like the Dharma to mirror our complexity. And we manifest that in many ways. And I'm not saying these ways are good or bad. I'm just saying that, for example, reading many books about the Dharma. I've said this, no matter how many books you read, they will not give you the Dharma. There is no book out there. If there was, it would sell 1 million copies. But there's no, or 1 billion copies of it, but there's no book that can give you the Dharma. Now, there are different teachers who express the Dharma differently, some who see the Dharma differently. And that gives rise to this sort of an endless stream of books. Books are not bad. Different teachers are not bad. But if you spend too much time in the books, you will be confused. You will hear this teacher says this teacher says that, this teacher says something else. Now, your intellect will love that. There's a lot to chew on there. There's like a lot to, is this one right? Is this one wrong? Da da da. How do I do this? And the consequence is that your practice will become more complicated and you will become more confused. And we often mistake that for progress in 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 training. And we have to constantly come back to the fact that this is not an intellectual endeavor. This is not grad school. she who knows the most ways to talk about the Dharma is not necessarily the one who has the Dharma, right? And I bring this up because I see this happening a lot. And I think it's a sort of a natural tendency that arises out of our complexity. We are complex, so we want to have a complex Dharma. We are analytical, so we want to have an analytical Dharma. We are scholarly, so we want to have a scholarly Dharma. We want to recreate the Dharma in our own image. And that cannot be done. Cannot be done. I mean, it can be done, but if your intention at some level is to realize the truth of the Dharma, it cannot happen via that pathway. It doesn't matter how smart you are, no matter how many books you've read. Generally speaking, those will only cause more confusion. In part because what we're seeing with Joko, she's incredibly skillful. There's no question that she has the Dharma deeply, but she gets caught in the semantic traps like everybody else. Maybe less than many other teachers or some other teachers, but nevertheless, they are there. I think it's impossible to teach without falling into those traps. You know, one of the teachers who I think was probably most skillful in avoiding that was Bankei. Now, a lot of people don't like Bankei. I think in part because Bankei was just too damn simple. Remain in the unborn. You know, the students say, "Oh, should I do this?" Remain in the unborn. Yeah, but what do I do if no? Remain in the unborn. Okay. It was his teaching was ridiculously simple, very clear. But I do think that. I think part of the reason Bankei doesn't get more recognition is he was too simple, too clear. There's not a lot to chew on intellectually with Bankei. What should I do? Remain in the unborn. But I think that is where our practice should be. In the simplest, least complicated, least intellectualized way of understanding and practicing. Now, what does Bankei mean by the unborn? Well, another term for it is our Buddha mind. Right? What is he saying? He's saying just remain in the Buddha mind. And how do you do that? We just live. We immerse ourselves. We live in intimacy. We don't build conceptual castles. We don't add a head or multiple heads on top of our head. And primarily, the most important thing, and I keep coming back to this, I'm not very creative. And as the older I get, the less creative I become and the more stultified, is that we just let go. All of Zen can be summed up in two words: let go. And, and maybe two more: just let go and just live, just immerse. Don't create and enhance the ego. So this ego is a persistent critter. It's popping up all the time. What should I do? Let go. But what if the ego pops up 1,000 times? Let go 1,000 times. Very simple. Ponke would say, return to the unborn. Same idea. Let go. How do I let go? Just let go. Now, when I encounter this, I discuss these things in Daisang with people, it's often followed by, yeah, but. Yeah, but. Yeah, but what should I really do? What do I need to focus on? Right? And there is no yeah, but. Just let go, just live, just immerse ourselves in this moment, in this reality, in our lives, for better or for worse. If today I'm sick, I'm sick. If today I'm sad, I'm sad. If today I'm happy, I'm happy. Whatever it is. The Buddha promised the end of suffering. He didn't promise the end of the human experience. He didn't promise the end of life. He didn't promise the end of confusion or fear or doubt or any of the things that arise in our lives that we aren't fond of. But we have a tool. That tool is letting go. And with that intimacy, instead of separating from things, separating from our reality, separating from our feelings, we become intimate with them. We live them fully, wholly. Joko was talking about this in terms of like sesshin, and I think it makes. I mean, to the sense in the sense that sesshin is kind of a microcosm of life. So most of you have been to sesshins, right? The sesshin is designed to make us uncomfortable. This sesshin is designed to throw off our usual patterns, our usual habits, the ways in which we live in the world with at least the illusion of comfort. So sooner or later at a session, we're uncomfortable. We don't like it. And we might at that moment to go, what's wrong with me? Why am I loving this session? Well, the session is designed to be unlovable. Tired, we have leg pain, we have back pain, we have boredom. All kinds of things come up in a session. But what happens is, over the course of the several days, is that we stop all that struggle. We stop all that resistance. We just be there. We just do it. We just sit. We just eat. We just walk, whatever it is. And many of you have described this to me. It's like, okay, by the end of this issue, oh, I felt wonderful. I was like, oh, I wanted it to go on more days. Same session, same activities every single day. Why does that happen? Because we forsake our resistance and we immerse. We could do that on the first day, but why would we want to do that when we've got all our bullshit that we brought with us that we can spend a few days processing? So as it is with Sesshin, it is with life. Sesshin is a microcosm of our lives. It's a little pressure cooker version. When things come up we don't like, we just immerse ourselves. We do our best not to resist, not to pull away, not to close our eyes, just to go forward. And not to say, yeah, but just let go. Yeah, but why don't I, should I be aiming for this? I hear these all the time in Daisan. Don't aim for anything when you practice. Don't seek anything. If I asked you right now, should you seek anything from Zen, you would all say no. You'd know that's a trick. I'm trying to lure you out. But in the next minute, you'd be saying, yeah, but should I be seeking? Well, you know, so get rid of the yeah, but. No, yeah, but. Just practice. Just sit. Just live your life. Just do your best. Okay. Questions, comments, concerns, observations, rebuttals.
Well, I feel a little bit in a tricky position because unless I just let go, in which case I don't have anything to say, um, I'm afraid that whatever I have to say is going to be a yeah, but um, when you started out, Peter, you mentioned something about progress in training, progress in our practice. And I think Bunke is saying, no, there is no progress. You just let go, just let go. Um, but yeah, but as one thing, kind of a question that I had from Joko Beck's book, she is talking of the point of practice is clashing with what all of the thoughts in our head are clashing with what is. And then she goes down further and she says, um, every day we get many opportunities to see the clash between what we want and the way it really is. And so as you were talking, I was thinking, would a way of um, thinking about our practice be that if over time we are accepting of what is, not wishing things would be different, that seems like kind of the physical manifestation of letting go. I mean, letting go is kind of a mental thing, but uh, if if I find myself in the course of my day saying, okay, this is it. I'm not going to get all involved with wishing things were different. Is that in itself an act of letting go?
Well, it can be. Yeah.
So what she's saying would be consistent with um, what you're saying of just let go. And if you let go, then there's less clash between what we want and the way it really is.
Uh, yes. You sound uncertain about that. What is it?
Uh, yes, I'm having a duality problem, I think, because letting go, I think, oh, in my head, oh, let go, let go. Uh, but if I'm actually in an action where, oh, so and so canceled this afternoon and I really wanted to do whatever, oh, that's not a good example. Um, I guess I'm just trying to see letting go as manifested in our life rather than just in my head. And perhaps what is so obvious that I'm trying to say here is that just accepting things as they are is a manifestation of having let go.
Letting go can exist in our head and it can exist outside of our head, right? It can be. if someone cuts me off on the highway and my initial reaction is anger, and what I want to do is go flip that person off, right? But I let it go and don't do that. That's got the outward manifestation, but it's also an inward, it's also an inward ch change. I've
Mm.
let go of my anger, of my hostility towards this person and what they did. And so I'm actually not quite sure whether that interior exterior distinction is valuable. Whatever I don't need to know whether it's in me or outside of me. I just need to let go of it.
Mhm. Somehow it's just helpful for me to link the two so I don't relegate my practice to something that I'm on the cushion and I'm letting go, letting go. It's helpful to see it more in my life as something that's meaningful. And I'll stop talking now. Thank you.
I'm a little just to, perhaps chase this a little bit. But wanting in and of itself is not bad, I take it. I mean, gee, I want to see the museum in Philadelphia, but I can't get there. Gosh, I can get that, but wanting it isn't a bad thing. Um, I mean to just parse the words, but there must be different kinds of want or being obsessed by them or trail off um, into losing, being distracted from life somehow when it becomes obsessive. But wanting itself, would seem to me, can't be in and of itself somehow bad and wrong.
Well, I would start out taking exception with the whole thing about bad. What's bad? What's wrong? Practice is just practice. It's not about some things are bad and some things are good, some things are right, some things are wrong. We letting go, let go, not attaching is something that exists sort of beyond right and wrong. And furthermore, the spirit of practice is a spirit in which there isn't right and wrong, right? If you're practicing, I don't know, hitting a baseball, sometimes you're going to hit it really well, and sometimes you're going to swing and miss. Not wrong. It's just you swung and missed, you know? So I think, so there's an aspect of judging there, Cal, that I think that we want to avoid, even that judgment. Um, it's another thing, it's another sort of aspect that we add to our practice that shouldn't be there, or we don't need it there, or, the judgment of our practice, the self-judgment often manifests. Oh, my practice today was good. Oh, my practice today was bad. No, my practice today was practice. Just that. No such thing as good and bad practice. In fact, we don't know. You may sit for a while and have your mind wander off 10,000 times, and you bring it back to your object of practice 10,000 times. Is that good practice or bad practice? Where another day you sit down and your mind is like right there and it's perfect and it's not going anywhere. And oh my God, I'm finally getting it. Is that good practice or bad practice? And there's a few answers to that. The first answer is there's no such thing as good or bad practice. Again, practice is just practice, right? but secondly, who knows? You know, I often go back to that research at Harvard in the 90s. The name of the guy who was doing that skipping my mind this morning. But what he showed was that what he called the meditation response, meditation effect, didn't happen when the mind was perfectly focused. It happened when the mind drifted off and came back. And it was the act of coming back to paying attention, not the act of paying attention, that caused the meditation effect. And I think that's the same is true with our zazen. If your mind wanders off 10,000 times and you bring it back 10,000 times, that is practice.
I think the person was Herb Benson.
Yes, you're exactly right. Yes.
And I raised the point because Joko, as Susan said it, juxtaposed wanting from reality. And that threw me a bit, but I certainly get the idea, the correction.
Well, I mean, to a certain extent, again, I think we just need to take the right and wrong. We all want things, right? We want. Some of it is biologically necessary. We want to eat. We want to drink, right? If we didn't want to do those things, we would die. So the other thing that I think we have to constantly guard against is perfectionism. You know, we cannot. I think maybe so much of your point out. We can't live without wanting. Is wanting wrong? No. Is it a problem? No. If you want breakfast and you go and eat breakfast, is that a problem? Where does it become a problem? Well, it becomes a problem if I want things I can't have. Right? And if because of that I'm disturbed, I want to have breakfast this morning in Paris. Not gonna happen. If I am attached to that and I become upset about that, that's a problem. So in a certain sense, the wanting itself is not a problem until it kind of becomes obstructed, and then I become upset or annoyed or frustrated and so on and so forth. Right.
It seems like we want to eat is very, very elemental, you know, very, very fundamental. It doesn't have to have any concepts attached to it. But if we have the concept of we want to eat breakfast in Paris, well, that's a concept. You know, it seems like the letting go is letting go of concepts, things that are concept, as opposed to letting go of wanting something, you know, at a really, really fundamental concept free level, which is what being hungry is. You want to eat, but you don't have to have a concept associated with it.
I think that's part of it. You know, another suggestion might be that we're inserting a layer that doesn't even need to be there. Hunger is a physiologic experience. I feel the hunger if I go and eat. I have, as you've explained, I've eliminated, there's no concept involved there, right? It's physiologic sensation of hunger, eating food. That is very direct. Now, not everything has a clear physiologic basis like that, and that's where it gets kind of a little bit messier and more confusing.
Peter, I'll jump in with one other question here. And this is again from Joko Beck's book. And she is talking about there are several ways to practice. And the first one is with a koan. Another way, she says, which is our practice here, is to slowly open ourselves to the wonder of what life is by meticulous attention to the anatomy of the present moment. And I think you would disagree with that. I think you would say that meticulous attention to the present moment is not letting go. It's going after something. Is that right? So I'm not sure if you would agree with what she has said.
Well, I think I agree with you, agreeing with my disagreement. But I think that sounds like mindfulness to me. That sounds like putting the head on the head. It's like paying attention to paying attention, right? It's as
Yes.
opposed to just being, just doing, just responding. So yes. But let's go to the issues of, when we're doing, I'm going to say we've got two basic types of practice. We've got the practice that we do on the cushions, and we've got the practice that we do all the rest of the time, right? Very simple. What do we do on the cushions? Well, some people do shikantaza, and some people do koan study. So let's look at that. When we're doing koan study, what are we doing? We're paying attention to the koan. We are approaching non-separation by immersing ourselves in the koan to the point at which there's not me, there's not practice, there's not a koan, there's just this unified field, if we want to use that language. Okay, because we're totally immersed. We're not separate, non-separation. All of our practice points to that. Now, the same is true with shikantaza. It's a little more complicated with shikantaza, and I think people, with the koan, there's the sort of the clarity of the koan. I know where I've got to put my mind. I've got to put my mind on the koan. When there's shikantaza, I've got this big empty expanse. Where do I put my mind? Where do I concentrate? How do I not separate? And the answer is I don't put it anywhere. Or I put it everywhere. But those are the same thing, slightly different spin.
Peter, if I may,
Oh,
if I may just interject for 1 second, see, it reminds me of the line from Dogen about, the bringing yourself toward the 10,000 things is delusion, and letting the 10,000 things come to you is enlightenment. And, I feel like I always had a problem with the concept of concentrating because it's always my ego trying to focus on something. But I find that if I really just stop doing that at all, then the sort of sensory experience sort of comes to me in a much richer and more full way. But then, of course, if I think about that, that has happened, then I've lost it all. All you can do is be it, and so anyway.
Yeah, no, I think that Dogen is right. Yeah. Oh, I'm choking on that statement. Okay. No, I think that distinction, I mean, Dogen went possibly further than anyone in trying to capture the nature of the Dharma in language. And to some extent, that's why Dogen seems so obscure. Dogen is talking about very concrete experiences, but if we haven't had those concrete experiences, it's, excuse me, it can sound like mumbo jumbo because he wasn't doing a logical exposition. He was describing the states of his experience. So, for example, body and mind falling away. Body and mind falling away is not a concept, it is an experience. But if you haven't had that experience, then we kind of add on all kinds of, well, what does that mean kind of thing. So that's one of the interesting things about Dogen. Dogen is so precise in a certain way, but it's precision that's grounded in the experience. And so again, he talks about being enlightened by the 10,000 things, which is the point that you're on, Gary, the 10,000 things coming to us as opposed to us chasing them. But see, it has this way of making complexity. We'll go back to the baseball analogy. I don't know why I'm on baseball this morning. I have no interest in baseball, but it's okay. All right. It's like we're saying, I'm the batting coach. And you come to me and say, I want to improve my batting. And it's like, well, you got to hold your hands here. You got to move this. You got to look over there. You got to stand this. You got to put your feet a little wider apart, blah, blah, blah. Or I could say, just hit the motherfucking ball. you know? Okay. Sometimes we just have to swing. And we put our whole body and mind into that swing. We can't analyze it. That pitch is coming 100 miles an hour. There's no time for analysis, for thinking, for preparing, should my hands be here or should they be here? Should they, should my feet be 2 feet apart or 2.5 feet apart? Nothing. 100 miles an hour, here it comes, swing. That's life. So why do we practice? Well, for the same reason that the baseball player practices, right? you've got to swing that bat 1,000 times to be prepared to swing it that one time when the pitch is coming at you at 100 miles an hour. The Zen archer, you got to pull the bow and shoot the arrow 1,000 times before you can hit the center of that target. So both things are true. So I'm looking at all your faces and see these general looks of confusion, quizzicalness. And I'm thinking, okay, I failed again. I was trying to explain this in the least complicated manner, and I've now gotten it complicated. and, and everybody now is like, what the is he talking about? Okay. It seems to be this is a sort of quicksand that we get in when we discuss these things. And those of you know about quicksand, no, quicksand is just water and sand. Right? And if you swim, you can swim in quicksand. If you struggle, it pulls you down. This having to do with vacuums and things, I guess. So just swim. Quicksand is, go ahead,
oh,
Deborah. I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
when I'm doing shikantaza, sometimes what I find myself doing is coming back to my feeling a sort of hum in my body, which is an experience. It's a humming. And I keep coming back to that, which is quite distinct from thoughts that come and go. And sometimes I find that helpful. Koans are different, but the understanding that occurs in the process of working with a koan, understanding comes from nowhere. It occurs. And that is the beauty of koan study. Opening up yourself to you don't know what, you cannot anticipate. It happens.
Yes, thank you. Well, and I would argue or say that it happens because of the non-separation. Because we cease to objectify the koan, we cease to struggle with the koan, and we start to be the koan. And when that happens, the teaching of the koan is revealed. It was there all the time, but we couldn't see it because we were kind of struggling and trying to construct it and position it and all the things that we do in our minds. Okay, this is, this just seems to be getting more complicated by the moment. So let's go back to Joko. Any questions that before we leave off of Joko, thoughts or questions that people have about, in addition to the ones that have come up already?
One quick thought, it seems like she doesn't talk about letting go in that terminology that much. She seems to have a focus on getting really intimate and familiar with sort of the whole gestalt. Like if you're arguing with somebody, to see you and the person you're arguing with and the argument sort of instantaneously is the same thing. And then it seems like letting go is a side effect of that.
Yeah. Cool.
I'm not sure I understand that. Say it again, Gary, if you don't mind.
Um, uh, if I'm having an argument or with somebody, or I'm, there's me and there's them, and we're separate. And so I'm sort of attached to this, making these two separate things come into alignment or something, I guess. And Joko just seems to be saying, well, you see you and the other person, and the argument is just a sort of a process that's happening. Don't add to it by creating you and them as these separate things. It's just one gestalt. And then there's nothing to let go of. So you sort of let go as a side effect. That's how I see it. She doesn't talk about letting go very much, but I think she's after it, as a side effect of seeing the whole situation as one thing.
She does talk about stepping back, doesn't she? Wouldn't that be a form of letting go?
But when she says step back, I feel like she's saying that so you get a wider view
Yeah,
of the whole
Yeah.
situation at once. And then you let go because you're not one of the parts of the situation.
yeah.
Yeah, she talked about if you're on the road in the middle of traffic all around you, you're feeling one way. And if you go to the top of the skyscraper and you look down on it, then you see the whole thing and you feel differently towards it. So I think that was one of her examples of what you're talking about, Gary and Deborah.
And when you do that, it drops away naturally, I think is what she said. It evaporates. You're in your dirigible looking down, and then you understand it and it goes. Isn't that,
But then you're also you're an observer.
Yes.
That's what it sounds like to me. I mean, it sounds to me it's a legitimate psychological technique, but I'm not sure that that's consistent with the Dharma in the way that you're saying, Susan. It's making us a spectator. It's creating non-separation, right? Rather than being intimate. It takes us to another level that's different from where the conversation is happening.
Just a different view.
Yeah, yes. I don't think we can be intimate and have that different view.
But I feel like a different way of what she's saying is like we be this whole situation, not that we're necessarily, even though, I mean, the language, it's so hard with the language to express it. So you would have the idea of looking down on it, and that creates that separation. But I feel like she's sort of trying to point to being the whole situation rather than just your part of it, your little part of it that's in opposition to somebody else.
See, we may be just be in the linguistic trap again. Because isn't being the whole situation non-separation?
Yes.
There's no amount of language that can help us walk out of this room. It's just, you get wrapped around, we're getting wrapped around the axle, as I like to call it. It strikes me that one of my very first books that I read when I was first introduced to Zen back in the early 2000s was Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind by Shinryu Suzuki. And he throughout the entire book, he always says the entire solution to this is just sitting. And yet, he wrote an entire book about that, which is almost hysterical. But I don't know. That's the beauty of Zen. Words can't capture this. You just have to live it.
I think so. I think that's why we often find ourselves in this conundrum, because we're trying to understand and explain what should just be lived.
I'm going to stick my neck out, and maybe this will be too academic. But when I first was sitting, I was fairly recently back from Japan, and I could still read some of the Chinese characters. So I looked at the four vows. I mean, I was so much in my head. And we have them translated, reality is boundless, I vow to perceive it. And the actual words, Homon Murio Seigan Gaku, our Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to learn. And it's the kind of learning that a martial artist does, where you do it and do it and do it and do it and do it until there is no thought. And you react instantly, appropriately to the situation. And that absolutely blew my mind. And we don't hear that very often. But for me, that goes back to what Peter was talking about earlier, about letting go, letting go, letting go, letting go. You do and do and do and do until there is no thought and there is a response that is completely appropriate. And the fact that it's in our vows is just fabulous to me.
And we do have a translation that's very close to that, Margaret. One of the one we say it in ceremony, we say Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to wake to them. Which is kind of close to what the translation that you just gave. Is everyone exhausted now? All Joko's fault. Let's blame her. She's not here. Any final thoughts people have? Maybe this is useful. Sometimes just in order to let go, we have to get exhausted. We just have to use up all our possibilities. It's like, but this, but that, but this, but that. And then finally we give up. And when we give up, we're there. That's another thing that happens at Sesshin. You get exhausted. Haven't got a lot of surplus energy to argue with the universe. When you get old, you don't have to go to Sesshin to be exhausted. You can be exhausted all the time anyway. Okay.
Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to put an end to them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The enlightened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good day, a good rest of Labor Day weekend.
Thank you.
Happy Labor Day.